So I'm David Reiss, professor of law at Brooklyn Law School. I haven't seen the attendees, but I think I probably taught some or many of you in real estate or in the community development class. And as many of you know, Brooklyn has a really vibrant real estate curriculum, both on the full-time faculty, but really because we have an extraordinary adjunct faculty who are top practitioners in all areas of real estate law. As people on this webinar also probably know, probably the biggest place that Brooklyn Law School students go is to real estate, broadly defined real estate transactions, construction, land use, finance, the whole gamut. And it's a particular point of pride for the school, and it's a particular point of pride for me at the school. And what's great about our panel is we just really have such a broad range of kind of people at the pinnacle of their careers, but really in different pieces of the real estate world with a lot of insight. And our panelists come from a bunch of different classes. So we kind of have an interesting set of snapshots over time about the practice of real estate law, broadly defined. The panel today is obviously very timely, the future of New York City real estate. If you had this panel, in an up market or in a down market, there'd be a real similarity to the discussion, and people would talk about the business cycle, and you behave one way in one part of the business cycle and another way in the other part of the business cycle. But what makes today so different is the pandemic and the impact that the pandemic has had in the short term on the New York City real estate market. And really, we're all looking to the future to figure out what's the medium-term impact and what's the long-term impact. And I think our panelists are going to have some real insights to share about that. Before we get into that kind of reading the tea leaves of the future, I'm going to ask each of the panelists to tell us about their first job after they graduated from law school. I think that's a really important thing for students and for our younger alums to hear, and that people don't usually have a career path that follows a direct line. Most people's career path is a little circuitous, and in retrospect, it always makes sense. But while you're in it, you're like, what's this path I'm on, and where am I going? And so it'll be interesting to hear from each of our panelists about where they started out, and then to talk a little bit about where their career took them and where they are right now. So let me just introduce them by name, and then maybe we'll go in the order of the names that I read off, and they'll each get a chance to tell us their story, their professional story. Before I say that, though, let me just remind everyone that we're going to take Q&A in the Q&A in the webinar. If it's in the chat, I may lose it. So it's better if you want the question to be asked, but to put it in the Q&A. I'm going to save those Q&As till the very end, but it'd be really helpful if you did the Q&As during the program so that we could jump right into them when we get to that part. I'm thinking, although we'll be a little flexible, I'm thinking that it'll take about 20 minutes or so for each of the panelists to not each, but for all of the panelists to introduce themselves. I'm hoping that we have a little bit of crosstalk for the second third, where the panelists maybe push each other on some of the things they said or some of the prognostications they've made about the future, and then the final third to go to Q&A from our audience. And I see actually our attendees have really jumped up from just a few minutes ago. So without further ado, we have Lisa Bova-Hiatt, General Counsel at New York City Housing Authority, class of '94. We have Laurie Grasso, class of '99, partner and co-chair of Global Real Estate Practice at Hunton Andrews Kurth. We have Liang, CEO of Sun Group, where he's also principal attorney of Ricky Liang, his own firm. And we have Sophia Valiotis, 04, who's the CEO of Alma Realty. And I don't think I said Ricky's class here. He's class of 15. So really, we have a nice range from class of '94 up to class of 15. And that will give you a nice sense of the arc of a bunch of interesting real estate careers. So with that, let me turn it over to Lisa. You have the floor.
Thank you so much, Professor Reiss. It's such a pleasure to be here to talk about, my real estate career. Mine actually started while I was still a student at Brooklyn Law School. One of my professors, Professor Crea, who many of you either, if you haven't had him as a professor, I think his reputation at Brooklyn Law School certainly precedes him. So Professor Crea reached out to me one day and said, "Congratulations, Lisa, you are going to be working at a title company this summer." That was my second summer of law school. I, of course, had no idea what a title company was, what it did. It actually was on Remsen Street. So he sort of walked me over there, introduced me to the owner. And that really started me on a trajectory that I could have never really anticipated. I worked there for a short time after law school. And at a closing, I met an attorney who handled a lot of the real estate at the New York City Law Department at Counsel. And so it was because of this job that I got because of a professor that started me on this career at Counsel. I spent 19 years at Counsel in their condemnation and certiorari division. And I don't think anyone really goes to law school saying, you know, what I really want to do when I graduate is eminent domain. You know, I want to acquire property by eminent domain for the city of New York and handle tax appeals and dealing with the value of real estate. But again, it was such a wonderful opportunity. I handled some incredible transformations in the city of New York, the Barclay Center, Atlantic Yards, Hudson Yards, the end of Metrotech, and the end of the 42nd Street redevelopment project. Really, really transformative, interesting economic development projects. In 2005, when the US Supreme Court decided Kelo v. New London, that's when everyone actually started learning in the mainstream what eminent domain was and what a useful tool it is for municipalities and especially urban areas to reinvent themselves. And I always said that it was a very difficult thing because for the first 15 years of my career, no one cared about eminent domain. And at a cocktail party, nobody ever wanted to speak to me. But after the Kelo case, when my grandmother could read about eminent domain in People magazine, I knew, and everyone had an opinion on the left and on the right. So I stayed at Counsel for about 19 years. And then interestingly, because of the way the Bloomberg administration was run, I got involved in storm recovery. And it was right around the time of Hurricanes Irene, Sandy, and Lee. And I basically reinvented myself and moved from acquisition of property by eminent domain to storm recovery, working with HUD regulations. And I took a job with the governor's office of storm recovery. The state of New York received an infusion of about $4.5 billion from HUD to handle the state's recovery after the storm. I stayed there for about 5 or 6 years and then did a bit of consulting after some other severe storms in Texas and the Virgin Islands, Hurricanes Harvey, Maria, and Irma, and then came back to the city to be the general counsel of the CUNY Construction Fund. And now I'm almost on my year anniversary working at NYCHA, handling affordable housing and all of the housing issues that come with working for, I mean, NYCHA is basically a small city. If it was a city, it would be the 33rd largest city in America. And we have a population that rivals some very large cities. So it was definitely a circuitous route to get here. The work that I did in storm recovery got me very familiar with the HUD regulations that we deal with on a regular basis. And, you know, so super happy that, you know, 25 years ago, Professor Crea got me my first job that, you know, I could have never imagined would have brought me to the Housing Authority those many years later.
Thanks, Lisa. Before I turn over to Laurie, you have to give us one prognostication. What's in the cards for New York going forward?
You know, interestingly, I think we're going to see a lot of reimagining around commercial real estate. one thing that the city of New York does not have a lot of is housing. No matter what, we always have a housing shortage, and especially affordable housing. So I feel that as businesses reinvent themselves, I think there are so many businesses who could have never imagined that they could be working remotely for now almost a year. And I think that you'll see a lot of commercial real estate transforming into housing, and hopefully some of it affordable.
Mm-hmm. Making that would be a nice silver lining of a tough time. Laurie, the floor is yours.
Okay, great. Lisa, that was so great. I love hearing people's career paths. I think you learn so much. So I graduated in 1999. I really wish I was Ricky and it was 2015. It does feel like it was yesterday. It's so strange, when you think back. Time does really go by fast. And so how did I get to where I am? So when I graduated Brooklyn, I was very interested in corporate law. And I had done pretty well at school. I had ended up, after my second year, I did okay, but after my third year, I did much better. And quite honestly, I didn't have so many opportunities available to me after my second year. There were a couple of larger firms that I had interviewed with. And I remember going to the interviews and thinking, there was one firm in particular that made me an offer, and they wanted me to do like airplane litigation or something. It was just something so foreign to me. And I remember leaving the firm and thinking, I know I should probably go there because it's a big firm, but it just doesn't feel right to me. And so ultimately I decided on a mid-sized firm called Herrick Feinstein, which had a really strong boutique real estate practice. And at the time I didn't know I wanted to be a real estate lawyer. I grew up in a really small town in upstate New York. I was sort of new to the city, but I definitely fell in love with real estate. And it was because I was at Herrick and I was working on real estate transactions, and they were great to me. They allowed me to work on corporate deals and real estate deals. And when I was on the real estate deals, I just kind of felt like I was home. And at that time, we weren't doing it like this. We weren't doing it on Zoom, but we were very much in closing rooms. And I just loved, at the end of the day, loved negotiations. And I actually got an A in negotiations. So I should have known something there. And so I spent about 13 years at Herrick Feinstein. I made partner after 7 years. It was really great training, a great experience. Represented a lot of really well-known developers in and around New York City. And then I was looking for a change. I was looking for, it was actually the last downturn. And I really kind of felt at that moment in my career that I understood New York real estate. And I knew all the players and I was comfortable and I kind of made it. And I wanted to experience real estate nationally, and we didn't have a national practice at Herrick. So I set off to find a new job. I did look at some in-house opportunities at the time. I had a lot of firms that were very interested in bringing me on board. And I joined with a senior partner at the time. And we decided what we were going to do is we were going to start a New York practice within big law, a big firm. And so after a lengthy search, we ended up at Hunton and Williams was the name at the time. It's now called Hunton Andrews Kurth. We went through a merger a few years ago. And it was sort of the perfect fit. This was 8 years ago that we joined. And we said to the firm, we said, we want to grow the New York practice. And they said, go for it. Do what you want. Bring in as many people, grow it, build it. And so it was a chance as a lawyer to be an entrepreneur. And to really grow a business. And the firm had a real estate framework. They had real estate offices, and we do have real estate offices across the country, but we did not have real estate in New York. And so there was a real need for us to come in. And so 8 years later, we've grown the practice. We have about 30 lawyers in the New York office. We have about 91 lawyers across the country. And I'm now co-chair of the department. So it's all kind of worked out. And I always say to people, you have to love what you do. I love what I do. I love being a lawyer, and I love being a counselor to my clients. I've had some of the same clients for my entire career. I know everything about them and their business. And so those, I think those are the things that have made it very fulfilling to me. And this ability to grow a business was just sort of additive. And it's been just really exciting. And so what do? We do everything in real estate. So we buy real estate, we sell real estate, we do financings, we do development deals, we do large scale deals, we do portfolio deals, we do every single asset class, affordable, multifamily, hotel, office, anything. And we also do a lot of joint venture work, because as real estate has evolved from when I first started, it is definitely a capital markets business now. It was very much a family-owned business, like Ricky and Sophia, right? But as deals get bigger, the capital stacks get larger, right? And more equity is needed. So we do a lot of joint venture work. We've helped a lot of people, launch their first funds. So it's a really varied practice within our group. We're not just lenders lawyers. We're not just borrower lawyers. We're really proud of the fact that we can do it all, and it makes the day-to-day really exciting. So that's my journey. It's a little straightforward compared to Lisa, but I'm thankful for my time at Brooklyn. I definitely feel like it made me grittier. It just made me really dig in and figure out what I wanted and to go for it.
So Laurie, that was great. You used a term that's really important for real estate practitioners, but I'm thinking that maybe some of our students are unfamiliar with the term capital stack. So I'm going to ask you to both explain that briefly, but also maybe make a prediction about where you see real estate finance heading in the next year or so.
Yeah, sure. So capital stack is how all of the money is put together on a real estate deal. So you'll have money come in from the owner or the developer, and then you'll have money come in from an investor. Then you'll have money potentially come in from a senior lender. And sometimes you'll have subordinate lenders like a mezzanine lender or preferred equity provider. And then in Lisa's world, you'll have grants, you'll have grant money come in. So those capital stack is really a way of like how all the stack of capital comes in for someone to own and develop real estate. What do I think about New York real estate? Hey, listen, if anybody follows me on LinkedIn, I am so all in on New York. And I agree with Lisa. Like we have to be creative. The one thing I think about a lot is I look at our older generation in New York and what were they able to do during COVID? Really nothing, right? There really needs to be, I believe, more community spaces. And so I'm hopeful that people can try to become a little bit more creative with retail coming out of this downturn and think of ideas for, the city to come together. So, it's going to be a rough couple of years. I mean, we've been working on workouts and modifications. But I think, it'll all be fine eventually.
Thanks, Laurie. Before I turn to Ricky, let me just tell our attendees, I don't see any questions in the Q&A. So if you're being shy, you don't want to be the first one, I'm going to encourage you to do it. So that way, after Ricky and Sophia speak, that we'll be able to get a sense of the kind of questions that people have. But without further ado, Ricky, I'm going to turn it over to you. You're muted, Ricky.
Sorry. Thank you, David. Wow, 2015, Laurie, seems like yesterday. I feel like I was just in law school, honestly. And I was like counting, wow, it's already been 6 years, crazy. I always knew I was going to be in real estate. I didn't think I was going to be a lawyer at all. My father was a real estate developer and in construction growing up. So I always saw him doing that, and everyone wants to be like that. And I always knew I wanted to be in real estate. But he was very adamant about me going to law school, going to becoming a lawyer, get that education before making the jump into development, into construction. And it was me and my dad don't agree on a lot of things, but that was probably the best decision he probably made for me. Going to law school gave me an immense, just a way of thinking and just immense resources to tap into in my career. And so my first job out of law school, I entered into litigation, and I did not want to. It was my father was really, he was like, you should really use your education, use it for a few years. And I I didn't think it was smart. I wanted to get right into it, but boy, am I glad I did it now, because I'm still very young. I'm 32. I have my whole life ahead of me to do real estate, but I now have litigation experience under my belt, which I use every single day. And to all the students out there listening, if you're unsure about yourself, if you think, oh man, why am I taking this litigation job? I really want to do this or transactional work. I think all type of experience helps. No matter what, you can always make the jump later on. That experience in litigation, whatever, will help you in the future. I think you'll see. So I joined a small firm, 10 lawyers, doing employment law. I did that for about 2 years. And, funny story, my first day on the job, it was a small firm, so they didn't have a lot of lawyers. My boss already sent me to court, like two days into my job. I had no idea what I was doing. And I remember being in the office till 1 a.m. I had boxes of paper this much that I had to drag into court the next day. And I was like, what am I doing? Like, I need to quit now. I really want to just quit being a lawyer and just go into real estate. But, I'm glad I went through that fire. And 2 years later, my father, who was still developing, he was doing his developing his first hotel at the time. It was a 42-key hotel on the Lower East Side. And it was a very interesting project. My father had never developed a hotel before. And I was like, okay, I think this is the right time for me to jump in, make that transition. Plus, I didn't want to work those 12, 14-hour days anymore, So I jumped into my father's firm. I worked along with him, and we opened our first hotel together. And that was approximately 4 years ago. And we've just been and my firm now, we have we do development, construction, we manage a multifamily portfolio, and we're just a very nothing like Sophia or Laurie, but we're a small family developer. My father was an immigrant, was very successful, and he made the most of what he had. And now we develop mostly residential condominiums, but we are looking at other deals now, because just with COVID, the whole entire market is just changing. And what Laurie said about having that sophistication and being a lawyer has really helped me tap into that next level of development. Because anybody, an unsophisticated developer can do a $1 to $10 million deal, but to take that next jump, you do require, private lenders, private capital markets in order to finance these bigger, deals, dreams that you want to build. You can't build a 50-story building with just friends and family money. There's just no way. So I'm so glad I went to law school, and I feel like I have so many friends that I met through law school that I can really help me now in my career to really do whatever project I want to do.
So Ricky, I have two questions. One you can predict already, but the first question is: did your dad want you to go to law school to save money on legal fees? And two, what is your prediction for what is your maybe a prediction about the hospitality industry? What do you think is going to happen in the next year or two in New York City?
To your first question, yes, absolutely. He definitely wanted me to become a lawyer to save on those closing fees, going to all types. You need a lawyer in every part of business, but he definitely wanted me to save on legal fees for sure. I myself, and I handle all the litigation in our company. Well, not personally, but I have to deal with it all alongside with the business stuff. So it gets busy, especially in COVID time. There is a lot of litigation going on. So another reason why I'm happy to be a lawyer. And two, what I think about the hospitality industry is, I read a lot of reports. I have a lot of people talking to me about this. They tell me that the hospitality industry will come back to 2019 levels to 3 to 4 years. So what I foresee is that what you're going to see is a lot of owners who was really gambling in the hotel market. A lot of them were, they're over leveraged, money was easy flowing in. So you're going to see a lot of those assets change hands. A lot of owners won't be able to keep them, nor do they want to. So you're gonna see a lot of changing hands in that in every turn cycle. But I also do see, like what Laurie and Lisa said, we're just gonna see a lot of reimagining of spaces. It's just the entire world has changed. COVID has hit a reset button on this, and technology has really, if you're not up to date on every day, you're behind the game already. I'm already speaking to people we're thinking about doing like cloud kitchens, which is like we're finding warehouses out in the suburbs, wherever. Just you wouldn't think, and we're putting kitchens there so that people who don't want to lease out retail, they can have their own kitchen in the suburbs and do direct delivery. And this is just one small example of how the entire market is just changing. So we're just gonna see a lot of what you like traditional retail real estate uses. They're all gonna change real quick, and I feel like owners, developers, investors really have to be fast and catch on with everything.
Great, thank you, Ricky. Before I turn it over to Sophia, I'll just say, and this is not even necessarily a problem, but I see nothing in the Q&A, but I think our panelists can totally keep having a conversation until something comes in the Q&A. But let's first hear from Sophia before we get some crosstalk amongst the panelists.
Hi, everyone. I guess it's not best to go last, but I'm going to try my best. I graduated in 2004 from Brooklyn Law School. I mainly chose Brooklyn Law School because of the real estate clinic that they had back then that I think is still being run by Deborah Bechtel. So it was the only, back then, it was the only clinic, the real estate clinic that was offered in the New York law schools. I can't speak about what is being offered now. So I wanted to go to this real estate clinic. So I came to Brooklyn Law School and I applied for the real estate clinic in my second year. And then I applied in my third year. And I didn't get it. It was limited to 8 students and the preferences. So it was my last semester of Brooklyn Law School. And I was like, this is the reason I came here. So I wrote an email to Deborah Bechtel. I was like, I really want to be in this clinic. And lo and behold, I was able to get into this clinic. So first lesson I would say is you have to be persistent about what you want. So I think that is something that is required in good times, bad times, all times. So I'm very grateful for that clinic. That clinic really did put into a practical experience. I took all the real estate classes that were offered. I knew I wanted to be in real estate. I grew up in a real estate family. I went to work with my dad when I was young and knew that real estate was something that was going to be in my future. I didn't know exactly how it was going to look. So I think that the real estate classes at Brooklyn Law School were great. They were offered as evening classes. I know that they've expanded since you came on, Professor Reiss. I did not have the benefit of having you when I was there, but so I really do appreciate that and the experience. I also did a clinic. I did during the semester, an internship at Department of Housing at HPD down on Gold Street. And I worked with third-party transfers, which I think is not around anymore. So I worked with Kenneth Kurland. I don't know if he's still around. We worked
He actually retired. He just, within the past couple of years, Ken was really? a great attorney.
Oh, yeah. And very, very nice and great to work for as a student. Yeah. And we worked on, I worked with a whole bunch of the attorneys when they were taking properties that were repurposing from the city and giving them to private developers in order to build them into affordable housing, which I think was a pretty successful program back then. So I was very happy to be part of that. And that was like my public experience. And it was very, very educational. So I really did appreciate the foundation that Brooklyn Law School had given me and the real estate legal experience that was offered. So I started working at Alma Realty right when I got out of law school. I had interned here while I was in law school, and then I joined. I was the first, attorney to work in the company. So I just pretty much started offering my services. I started managing all our outside legal and reviewing contracts and leases and New York City housing regulations, federal. It was, I spent a lot of time taking CLEs and learning a lot in the beginning. But as the company grew, we retained the general counsel. I started hiring interns from Brooklyn Law School, which have been great through the semesters for summer internships. Then we brought in some Brooklyn Law School grads. And it's been a great, we're about 6 associates now, and I manage the associates, and I also manage the outside legal that the firm handles. So what does what does a general counsel and legal operations of a real estate company do? I mean, we do anywhere from preparations of leases, closings, settlements for landlord-tenant disputes, commercial holdovers, non-payment matters. We research new ventures, zoning laws. We do collections. We represent the LLCs in New York City Housing Court and the Department of Buildings, all administrative, municipal, state, federal, all the different claims. So it's pretty busy, especially in this climate. I also, when I'm not doing that, I actually serve on the board of Alma Bank. So I am a board director. I've been doing this since 2007. So Alma Bank was started in 2007. So I've been doing it for 13 years. Wow. Okay. So I pretty much I had taken a banking law with Professor Fanto. Actually, I don't know if he's still around.
Yes.
Who is great. So I had to revisit that. And then I started taking some seminars on learning about banking law because that was not something I knew. And it's been a learning experience, but I think it's been really good. And the legal background really helped me in that area as well, because I could understand the compliance aspect of it and everything else. So I agree with Ricky, and a legal experience, no matter what you do, is invaluable. Legal education is what I meant. Want to talk about my advice to everyone starting out, please use all aspects of your education and your career as a learning opportunity. Always be dependable and have a follow through. I think that if you're present and available to your colleagues and supervising attorneys, you will have the opportunities to keep learning and to grow in your career. The practice of real estate is very detailed oriented, but also business minded. So I definitely would recommend that you follow the current events that are happening, read relevant case laws. I mean, what Lisa was saying about how suddenly eminent domain became very popular. Follow recent changes. I think the best real estate attorneys that I've worked with and have dealt with have been people who are very practical and business minded, knowing the climate that you're working with. Because at the end of the day, most cases settle. Everybody knows that. In order for you to be a good attorney that can make a settlement, I think you have to understand the dynamics of everything. I think having Laurie on your team, probably with her negotiation skills, can probably be really helpful. So I think it's just really important to really not just understand the practice of law, but understand the business aspect of it. For me, one of the most rewarding part of my careers has been working with young associates. So I think mentoring people throughout your career is really important. Not only can you guarantee the future attorneys are people who have learned the practice of law, but also I think that coming out as a new attorney, it's important to learn from a seasoned attorney how to properly practice, the respect for the law, and everything else. I always think that you should be kind and respectful to all your colleagues. I mean, from everybody, because that is really important, because that's what everybody expects to have in return. So I think from the person who cleans your office to the person who fixes your HVAC unit, I mean, I think to your adversaries, I think always being kind and respectful is really an important task, an important feature that I think is not really taught anywhere. So I just think that it's something to be reminded. I think being a female attorney brings some extra challenges. So I just wanted to add that. I think that it is very important to, it's not easy to be a female attorney. I think as a working mom, I think it's also especially difficult, but I think it's really rewarding and I would not have it any other way. But always remember, as an attorney, no matter what you practice, take care of yourself first, because you can't give to the law or to yourself if you're not taking care of yourself. So
Sophia. So I'm kind of torn. There's two things that I wanted to ask you about. One is about your predictions maybe for multifamily in New York, which is really complex. And I don't know if you have any thoughts about that. But then also you mentioned Alma Bank. And my understanding is there's this real move where you have a lot of real estate companies moving into financing real estate deals for others. And maybe if you had a couple of comments about that, it's kind of seems to me an interesting, relatively new development.
Okay, so the second, let me ask the first question. The first question was my future on New York real estate. It's going to be challenging for the next few years, but I am cautiously optimistic. But I do think a lot of it is going to be dependent on public-private partnerships, on making New York attractive for the people to remain here and for people to come visit again. I think that the vitality of the city is missing right now for obvious reasons, but that needs to be brought back. So I think that will require public and private partnerships, which I think that are not being done right now, but I do think are very possible and very attractive for everybody. I do think preservation of affordable housing is very important in our city. And I do think that I like Lisa's ideas. I think that expansion of more housing in the outer boroughs in all of New York is really important, because I do think people want to be here. And I mean, we need people to be here in order to provide jobs, in order to provide a tax base and everything else. So Alma Bank, your question was about financing. What kind of financing
is this a relatively new develop, or was the setting up of Alma Bank kind of a new approach for companies like yours, or just kind of where did that idea come from, maybe?
Okay, so I'll start with that. So Alma Bank was formed by there's a couple of majority shareholders. And they were primarily in the real estate, but it's a Greek community bank. So it was formed by a lot of Greek original. Right now, we're about 200 shareholders in New York and New Jersey. So it's a community bank. That's really been our play. It's a community bank, and we've actually recently did a really large amount of PPP loans. So I'm very, very happy for that, because those were really important. And we were able to do about $40 million of them, which is really big for a small community bank. We're about $1.2 billion. So we're not that small anymore. But we have one branch in Manhattan. The rest is Queens, Brooklyn, the Bronx. And we have 2 branches in New Jersey. So we're generally in commercial areas, trying to serve all, the mom and pop businesses, the individual consumers, but also larger commercial businesses. We have, I think our loan portfolio is about $1 billion right now. Yeah. And I think the banking future is a little challenging as well. But again, I mean, everything is interrelated. If the future of New York is positive, everybody will do well. And that includes everybody. I mean, it's just the reality.
Thank you. All right, so I have a couple of questions in the Q&A, but I want to first open up the panelists to any questions they have for each other. Or it doesn't have to be a deeply insightful question, or a question about career choices, or about the city, or about their specialty. Okay. All right. So that we can come into that later. Let me turn over to our. Oh, I see. Okay. So I see that there have been some questions, and Ricky actually answered them in the chat. But all right, let me start with the ones that are still open, and then maybe we'll go to those others as well. So someone asks, and this is a really important issue. It's a little inside baseball for those of you who are very new to real estate, but not to those who are not new to real estate. Do you think that force majeure will be a heavily litigated issue or a heavily debated issue on a lease in the upcoming years due to COVID? And really, this is really talking about for students and very young practitioners, really this notion of what governs the contractual relationship between a landlord and tenant when something extraordinary happens, like the pandemic. And so the clause in a mortgage, I'm sorry, the clause in a lease that governs that is called the force majeure, or like the powerful force that's interfering with what the parties expected the transaction would be like. Anybody want to take a stab at this? Has anybody been litigating this or negotiating with parties about this?
Yeah, I have. So I can take it really quickly. So, I mean, generally speaking, force majeure were things like, acts of God, really, acts of God, hurricanes, really forces outside of someone's control. And generally, most documents did not use the word pandemic, right? Because who's really been in a pandemic before? And so there's been a lot of back and forth between all contract parties. So it's not just a lease. So it's between a buyer and a seller, between a borrower and a lender, between a tenant and a landlord, on whether or not force majeure is applicable. And it is force majeure is generally to date strictly construed. So if it does not use the word pandemic, then it does not apply in COVID. That is the general law today in New York, and it is something that we are seeing people litigate. Another area that you may not realize, but there's a case pending right now, is whether or not COVID was a casualty. So in those same agreements, there are provisions relating to casualty. So if a casualty happens, it can excuse performance. And so creative lawyers have brought to the courts whether or not COVID-19 is a casualty. So generally speaking, on a going forward basis, all documents, depending on what side you're negotiating, are going to include the word, if you want it to, for your benefit, the word pandemic. I hope that answered the question.
So often leases or all legal documents are, every problem that's happened in the past gets put into the current draft of the document, but it's not necessarily thinking about the future problems. It's always an interesting drafting problem. There was I was going to ask Laurie a follow-up on it, but it just slipped my mind. Let me switch to another question. This is coming from a different angle. Any recommendations for networking in the real estate industry, and/or which centers of influence are the best to establish relationships with? Let's just open that up broadly to, how do you manage your career so that you go where you want to go?
I can start. And I think Sophia sort of touched on this while she was speaking. And I was thinking about it as everyone was talking. Every single job that I have gotten has been through word of mouth. I have not gone through a traditional hiring at any job. And I think that has a lot to do with the reputation that you build for yourself, which starts in law school, right? So that's the first thing. Always being proactive, doing whatever needs to be done, and building a great reputation for yourself. And I think that also goes with how you reinvent yourself, right? When I interviewed for the job at the governor's office of storm recovery, I walked in and said, I know nothing about this area of law. No one in New York does. But a smart, motivated person can learn anything, right? I'm not learning brain surgery. I'm just learning a different area of law. So having that confidence, which if you don't have, you learn as the longer you practice, I think is incredibly important. Attorneys now, even young attorneys, have, and I'm going to sound so old, but LinkedIn is such an incredible way. Bar associations, which is really what was the only thing that was offered when I was, a young attorney. Bar associations, local bar associations, the ABA, just your colleagues. My managing attorney now was my partner that I was randomly paired with for NIDA training when we were, 2 years out of law school. So the more relationships that you build, the greater your network will grow. I know it's a little hard during a pandemic, but LinkedIn. I, received a LinkedIn request maybe at the end of last summer from somebody who went to Villanova, who's starting at Villanova Law School. Villanova is where I went to undergraduate. And he said, oh, I see you work in real estate in New York. Would you mind having a conversation with me? So I reached out, we had a conversation. I actually put him in touch with somebody that I had, a Brooklyn Law School person who I had sat on another panel with to talk about, careers in real estate. And I think that's the way you do it. And I think, one other thing that Sophia pointed out also was paying it forward. We are all the product of the people who mentored us, and you should never forget that. And anyone who reaches out to me via LinkedIn, I will always get back to. It might not be, within 5 minutes, but I will absolutely always get back to them.
Yeah. I think if you're the first lawyer in your family, you hear about networking and it seems like it's this like mysterious thing. And you might not really believe that it works, but my experience is very similar to Lisa's where, I guess the first job I got out of law school was directly because of law school, but really everything else is word of mouth. It is your reputation. It is your network. And the sooner you realize that, the better off you will be. But let me also see if Ricky or Sophia or Laurie want to add anything to what Lisa had to say.
I can add to that. The real estate world among the developers is really not a collegial kind of environment. It's not a criticism, it's just a fact. But among attorneys, I think that there is some more networks. I remember going to some city bar young lawyer events. I went to quite a few CLEs. I think I used to email a lot of the speakers that I thought were very interesting and followed their careers because I thought that if I found somebody that was very interesting and thoughtful, I thought that they definitely were somebody I wanted to follow. So I would follow them. And honestly, I would call them up and if I had a question and they would answer it. I was very impressed by that. So I appreciated that. And I do the same thing when I can, of course. I used to go, there's an organization called CHIP, Community Housing Improvement Program. I forgot what the P stands for. And there was a couple of other owners groups. I would go to their events in order to kind of learn and meet. There was always attorneys there. So I would meet just kind of to read, I would read The Real Deal, or there's New York Real Estate Journal. There's the commercial real estate section of the journal. I mean, there's different avenues in order to read. And I would follow attorneys also by the reported decisions in the law journal. And I would say, oh, this was a really good case that they went. Or this case is definitely not somebody you want to use because this was not a good case. So you had to learn like that, and you could reach out to people. I think the networks are there, but sometimes they're just not, like they say, no one's going to come knock on your door and say, hi, I have this great opportunity for you. I mean, you have to, in this environment as well, I think it's a little bit more challenging, but I do think that there's people out there that are willing to mentor. And I think reaching out to them or in an area that even if you're maybe not be interested in is something that you have to be able to exit your comfort zone and kind of do that.
Yeah, I just want to echo this too. And it goes to one of the other questions in the chat about the job market. So I would say this, the New York real estate world is really small. It's interesting how small it is. And so if this is an area that you want to get into, then what Sophia is saying is right. Every person that you meet, they will come back around. And so, it's hard for you guys starting right now in this social and this, Zoom environment, because a lot of the relationships that I made early on were at a closing table where I was across the table from someone and they loved my lawyering and then they became a client and then they became a friend. So you need to figure out a way to recreate that, right? So I think the webinars are great. The webinars are good in terms of just learning the lingo. figuring out what the market's like, who the players are in the market. And then when we're out of COVID, definitely go to networking events. I love Commercial Observer. I love BizNow. I think they have great events. BizNow has really inexpensive tickets, and everyone that's at an event is there to market. Don't forget that. You're there to market. I'm there to market. Just because I've been doing this longer than you doesn't mean that we're any different. And you have to learn to ask for what you want, and you can't be afraid to talk to people. It's difficult, but the simplest way to talk to someone is, hey, Ricky, what's keeping you busy, right? What are you working on right now? You may have no idea what he's talking about, but you've started a conversation, and now Ricky's talking to you about his business. And so I just would say, as soon as we're out of COVID, get yourself out there. And I think this is going to be a really, really, really strong real estate market. I have so many clients who are looking to hire, who are hiring. I have so many clients who are capital raising. Why? Because we all just said there's opportunity. When there's opportunity, everybody's ready to pounce. And so people are, they're hiring, they're getting their staff up. We're full steam ahead. I mean, we're working on different types of transactions, but we're still busy. Everyone on this call has said how busy they are, right? So it might be a bad economy, but we're still busy. So there are jobs for you in the real estate market. And, don't be afraid to take something that's not perfect to start. I think we all kind of did that, right? Take it, be excellent, take those contacts and leverage.
Ricky, did you want to add something or?
Yeah, sure. I'll speak quickly. I mean, when I was in law school, it seemed like you couldn't escape real estate. It seemed like everybody wanted to be in real estate. Real estate was the hottest commodity. And really, I still think it is. Back then, you didn't even have to just go to specific events to meet people in real estate. You just go to any event. So, my advice is really just put yourself out there. If it's Friday nights, do I stay home and watch Netflix, or do I go out and see these people, friends? Go out there, get yourself out there and just start talking to people. Real estate is the ultimate relationship business. It is, we make deals just happen. 1 phone call, 2 phone calls, done. Get my attorney to handle the paperwork, but that's how deals really get flowing. So you got to put yourself out there and just socialize with people, talk to people. Don't be afraid. If you're a introvert, start working on that. Really got to just put yourself out there, and you will. And you're gonna find that everybody in the city is about real estate. No, everybody wants to make money in real estate in the city. So just get yourself out there.
So I think we have time for one more question. We have to end promptly because there's another event right at 6. And I'm kind of taking my inspiration from one of the questions that Ricky answered in the Q&A, the last question. And I guess the question is, what insights do you have about like inflection points? So when you go from a hot market to the financial crisis, you go from January 2020 to March 2020. What has experience taught you about what happens in the real estate market when there's a real change? And so the question was really focused on, people are stuck on old valuations, and they're not, and then the market seizes up for deals because, sellers are saying, well, my property is worth this, but buyers are saying, well, I'm not going to go anywhere near that price. So what experience, what have you learned from kind of practicing law through business cycles one way or the other? If anything.
I would, it's a unique opportunity. If you can practice in the bad times, you could always practice in the good times. So you have to, during these times, be able to roll with the punches is what my phrase is. But I think that if you've been able to handle COVID this far, I think you can practice law in real estate. It's about being adaptable. There's always a deal to be made. It's never going to be exactly how you want it, but there can always be a deal made if the two parties want to make a deal. So you have to just be able to know that. And this watching people more experienced, and again, being the first person to work sometimes, or the last person to work, or the person that will answer the email or be like, I want to learn more, is the person who will keep learning and being able to leverage that into something that they want to do.
All right, so let me just tie us. Thank you, Sophia. Let me just tie us up because it's 5:56, and I promised I would definitely have us done right before 6. So just stating, first of all, panels like this just excite me to no end because it's one of the fun things about teaching is to be really able to interact with so many people who love the subject area that you love, and then also to see how Brooklyn Law School launches so many really cool careers, really different and very cool careers. Is something that makes my job really meaningful to me. But a school really depends so heavily on its alums. It depends on them for events like this and to mentor the current students and younger alums. And so we're just really grateful for the participation of the panelists. We're grateful for those of you who attended as well. But consistent with everything that the panelists have said, Brooklyn Law School is part of that network, and it's part of what's exciting about this network is that it's really not just a network of your peers, but it's a network of people over the whole career arc. And taking advantage of that network is probably one of the best things you should do while you're in law school, but also while you're an alum. Coming back to the school and sharing your insights and learning from the insights of others is part and parcel of building your own personal network. So with that, I'm going to say thank you to Ricky and to Lisa and Laurie and Sophia. We really appreciate your time that you spent with us. And to our attendees, I hope this was valuable for you personally and for your careers. And I hope to see you at other events, and I hope that they're in person. Thank you all.